A Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, great millstone, for teaching us his truth, and citations to the sincere Akim and Akwathim. And listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will is always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I just wanted to go through just a little bit of history. I just came across as a little nugget here. I was going through one of my old books. The book is called Hebrew Heritage of Black Africa, and essentially kind of goes into a lot of the customs that you find in the books of Deuteronomy, Numbers, Leviticus, and the Torah, and how a lot of our people essentially kept those same customs, right? And you find them going under different various names today, such as Ashanti, Igbo, Yoruba, Bantu, Dahomey, so on and so forth, right? So I kind of just wanted to go through another custom here, going into, the spirit of jealousy, right? If a woman is believed to have, slept with another man, right? And I sincerely pray that this lesson is short and as well as edifying, right? So what happened, so how did we end up there? A lot of us, we got scattered, after the siege of 70 AD. The so-called Romans, they came in, destroyed the temple, and a lot of us, a bulk of us, fled into, in different places. Well, primarily one of those places we went into was the interiors of Africa, right? So this is Luke 21 to verse 24. And Yahushua said, "And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and they shall be led away captives into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled," right? So we got trodden down essentially, and we fled, right? There was a dispersion, right? And some of us went into different parts of Europe. Some of us probably fled east, right? Because when you think about the vastness of different empires like the Persians and the Medes, we've fled to different, we fled all over, right? But a bulk of us went into the interiors of Africa, right? So, and what I have on the screen here is really a map of where some of those Israelites would have walked. So here, if you look at the far side, it says Jerusalem, and they traveled down from Egypt, right? Because you had some of us that were in Egypt, and then they came down south, and then they skate across to the western side of Africa, right? So I want to read this page here, right? So this is page 40 in Hebrewisms of Black Africa. Sorry, that's the chapter. And here it says the observations of J. Layton Wilson were especially worthy of our attention for any study of this region. This reason is because he was a missionary in the Guinean area about 18 years. His book, Western Africa, His History, Condition, and Prospects, were published in 1856 before Christianity had an opportunity to make an impact on the culture and the religion of the region, right? So he was essentially studying the customs of, Jake prior to the presence of Christianity, right? So jumping down here in the last paragraph, it says Dr. William Bozeman, in his book about his travels in Guinea, which I believe, hold on, let me just see exactly. Guinea, I believe, I'm not sure exactly. Okay, so I know it's in West Africa. Let's just get a map and see. Okay, so it's close to Sierra Leone. So it shares a border with Sierra Leone, partially Liberia, Ivory Coast, and Senegal, right? So you had a lot of us, collecting, congregating there, right? So here it says, so in about his travels, it says Guinea observes that the women of this region must accept an oath drink to acquit themselves of any accusation of adultery. The law is that sickness or death which follows the taking of the drink, if evidence of guilt. It says Bozeman claims that the drink seems very much like the bitter water administered to the women in the Old Testament by the way of acquitting them of charge of adultery, right? So I want to read that because what he found and what he observed is actually found in the book of Numbers. So I'm just going to read this and read down a little bit right here. And it says, this is Numbers chapter 5, verse 11. And it said, then the Lord Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them that if a man's wife go aside and commit a trespass against him, and a man lie with her carnally, and it be hid from the eyes of her husband, and be kept close, and she be defiled, and there be no witness against her, neither she be taken with the manner. The spirit of jealousy come upon him, and he be jealous of his wife, and she be defiled. Or if the spirit of jealousy come upon him, and he be jealous of his wife, and she be not defiled, then shall the man bring his wife unto the priest, and shall bring her offering for her, the 10th part of an ephah of barley meal. She shall pour no oil upon it, nor put frankincense thereon, for it is an offering of jealousy, an offering of memorial, bringing iniquity to remembrance. So continuing on, it says, then the priest shall bring her near and set her before the Lord Yahweh. And the priest shall take holy water into an earthen vessel, and of the dust that is in the floor of the tabernacle the priest shall take and put it into the water. Right? So this is a case, when, a woman essentially kind of, she doesn't lie with her own husband, she lies with another man. And essentially, that spirit of jealousy comes upon him, because he has a gut feeling, an inclination that she essentially laid with somebody else, right? So this, continuing on, it says in verse 18, and the priest shall set the woman before the Lord, and uncover the woman's head, and put an offering of memorial into her hands, which is in the jealousy offering. And the priest shall have in his hand the bitter water that caused the curse, and the priest shall charge her by an oath, and say unto the woman, if no man hath lain with thee, meaning in a sexual sense, right? If thou hast not gone aside to uncleanness to another instead of thy husband, be thou free from this bitter water that caused the curse. Right? So, she had to take an oath, right? But it says, if thou hast gone aside to another instead of thy husband, if thou be defiled, and some man have lain with thee beside thine husband, then the priest shall charge the woman by an oath of cursing, and the priest shall say unto the woman, the Lord make thee a curse and an oath among thy people, when the Lord Yahweh doth make thy thigh to rot and thy belly to swell. So this is the what's the word I'm looking for? The outcome of what would happen if she did step out on her husband and laid with somebody else, right? This is verse 22, and it says, and the water shall go into thy bowels to make thy belly to swell and thy thigh to rot. And the woman shall say, amen, amen. And the priest shall write these curses in the book, shall not blot them out with the bitter water. And he shall cause the woman to drink the bitter water that causes the curse, and the water that causeth the curse shall enter into her and become bitter. Then the priest shall take the jealousy offering out of the woman's hand, and shall wave the offering before the Lord offer it upon the altar. And the priest shall take an handful of the offering, even the memorial thereof, and burn it upon the altar. And afterwards he shall cause the woman to drink the water. And when he hath made her to drink the water, then it shall come to pass that if she be defiled and have done trespass against her husband, that the water that causeth the curse shall enter into her and become bitter, and her belly shall swell. So this is what happens, the outcome, if she had done this thing, right? The husband, he had this inclination, he had this I don't want to say a sixth sense, but he had this feeling like, okay, his woman, stepped out on her, and then she laid with another man, because this is this is adultery, this is adultery on her part, right? Because she didn't lay with her own husband, she laid with another man's husband, right? And when you think about it, this is I guess, as you can say, this is the condition of the battle, because in this modern day society, everything is kind of like upside down, everything is topsy-turvy, right? So these women have essentially have laid with so many men to the point where like, you can't, like, all things are lawful, but not all things are expedient, right? But this is the condition that we're living in. All these women have laid with all these different men, right? So they have all these different spirits on them. The one thing, and that's another thing also. If you have a lot of experience with a lot of women, they always compare you to somebody else, some other man that they've been with before. Okay, he used to do this for me, and so on and so forth, right? And a lot of guys fall into that trap where they essentially are they feel like they can't match up to this one guy that was before them, right? And that shows you that women are really just supposed to have one man only, right? They're not supposed to be polluted with all these different seeds, with all these different spirits upon them, right? And that shows you, we need essentially a righteous kingdom, a righteous reset, right? So let me just finish this off here. This is verse, where was I? I'll read verse 27 again, and it says, and when he hath made her to drink the water, then it shall come to pass that if she be defiled and have come trespass against her husband, then the water that causeth the curse shall enter into her and become bitter, and her belly shall swell, and her thighs shall rot, and the woman shall be a curse among her people, right? And it says, there's a scripture in the Apocrypha that says, to essentially keep a watch over a shameless, daughter, because that way, when you keep a watch over, your daughter like that, she doesn't bring shame, to the family name. And when you think about it, this is the type of vibration, because America is in the spirit of whoredom, and that's the same spirit that America pushes on their women. If you really take it in, right? That vibration of whoredom, it trickles down onto the regular everyday woman, to do good all by yourself, that you're strong and independent, to essentially conduct yourself as a man without having the accountability of a man, essentially, right? That's really the name of the game, and the kind of game that they play. And they're realizing when they play that game to conduct themselves as men, they realize it leads them to a lot of detrimental effects, because their ability to pair bond and actually bond with somebody is compromised because of those different spirits, those different vibrations, those different entities that are on her, or rather in her. So verse 28, and it says, if a woman be not defiled but be clean, then she shall be free, and she shall conceive seed. This is the law, of jealousies, when a wife go aside instead of her husband and is defiled, or when the spirit of jealousy come upon him, and he be jealous over his wife, and shall set the woman before the Lord, and the priest shall execute upon her all his law. Then shall the man be guiltless from iniquity, and this woman shall bear her iniquity. So this is just the laws and procedures in in the event these things actually did happen, right? And this is the backwardness also of the society when you think about it too, because the society does two things. It gives women a lot of liberty, right? So these women do all kinds of nonsense with that liberty. It's not like they do anything constructive with it, right? They have the mindset and hot girl summer. I want to go to Dubai. I want to go to Paris. I want to go to Greece, and I want to fly over this place and that place and get OnlyFans, and you know what I'm saying? Like, this is the vibration. This is the thing that they do. They essentially want the so-called street cred as a man, right? And the scriptures say that not to give a woman much liberty, right? You keep her, essentially you keep her in straits, but you keep her, essentially doing productive, right? But this is the part of the battle, and this is far from the ancient times, right? This is the way things were in the ancient times, and this is the way things should be, right? This is why the Lord's ways, like the scriptures say, the Lord's ways are higher than our ways. As a matter of fact, let me get that. I didn't write anything down, so I'm kind of just flowing a little bit here. This is Isaiah 55 and verse 8, and it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, and neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord Yahweh. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts," right? And that's what is really what's needed on this earth anyway, is the proper administering, excuse me, the proper administering of the law, and these nations being in subjection, because their vibrations, their ways, their customs, are not leading to actual life. I was having a conversation with a guy, and he grew up in Saudi, and he was telling me, you can't really, when he was telling me about his experience living there, and it's like, how here, you normally might meet women, and you might go on a date with them, and you might go, what I'm saying? Like, you might meet women more casually. There is a lot more strict. They have a sense of modesty, modest clothing, modest apparel, and there is no dating, so to speak. There is no whole phase, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're talking to a woman, the objective is to actually marry her and take her on as a wife and add her to your house, her becoming your possession. And I thought that was very interesting too, because in the West, it is so far gone from the natural way of how things ought to be, right? And secondly, since we're talking about jealousy, jealousy, as the scriptures say, it's the rage of a man, right? So he doesn't want anybody else plowing with his heifer, so to speak, right? So that's pretty much the point. I didn't want to make the lesson too long, but I kind of just wanted to go into this next custom and show that there were a lot of different secular, I don't want to say the word secular, but they were different tribes, going under different names, practicing, the same customs that are found, in the book, right? There's a lot of information going out, and a lot of our people that have a very strong disdain for them being known that they're Israelites. And it shows you, as a matter of fact, I'll get this precept here, because the scriptures do talk about how in the last days there'll be scoffers. Let me get this. And I bring this out also for edification wise too, to also, you have a lot of tribes that essentially, kept the customs, going back into the laws, going back into the Torah, right? Because our people are so in such gross darkness that when they hear these things, it's such a shock to them, right? This is Sirach 21 verse 15, and it says, if a skillful man hear a wise word, he will commend it and add to it. But if one that hath no understanding heareth it, it displeaseth him, and cast it behind his back, right? So this is the nature of what's going on. A lot of our people, they would rather scoff than to actually examine that, this is what happened to us. We discontinued from a heritage, and essentially we got taken onto slave ships and brought to America, right? So that's pretty much the point. I didn't really want to make the lesson too long, but I just wanted to add that little nugget of another history chapter, right? But I pray and sincerely hope that this lesson was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashai. Until next time, I say Shalom.